From the headquarters of FtS English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. The presidents of the United States, Turkey and South Africa will be among the first speakers at the United Nations General Assembly. You're looking at live pictures of the UN headquarters as world leaders and dignitaries arrive for the start of the UN General Debate. Kicking off with his speech at 9 a.m. New York time, President Donald Trump is expected to discuss his efforts to reach a denuclearization deal with North Korea. He's also expected to call on other nations to isolate Iran. Meanwhile, the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is set to focus on the long-standing Syrian crisis, especially in the province of Idlib. And lastly, this will be the first assembly for the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who's likely to talk about the country's plans for economic recovery. And before his speech on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans for a second summit with North Korea.
A lot of very positive things are happening with Chairman Kim of North Korea, and you'll be hearing about that over the coming weeks. But I think some really, really important things are happening. As I said just a little while ago, we have an agreement to work out another summit, and we look forward to doing that. I'm going to be meeting with Chairman Kim in the not-too-distant future.
According to the European Union's representative for Foreign Affairs, Federica Mogherini, the Iranian nuclear deal is in everyone's best interest. Here's what she had to say.
I think the full implementation of the nuclear deal is in the interest of all, including Iran, and this is why I believe Iran has good arguments and good reasons to remain in the agreement. It's an open-ended decision to be taken. Obviously, the more operational decisions we'll manage to take and different countries implement, I believe the more Iran will have reasons to do that. But the fact that we are still here, being able to say that the deal is still fully implemented, as the IAEA has done less than a month ago, is something that is encouraging.
The foreign minister of Venezuela has warned that a number of countries will try to raise the issue of Venezuela at the United Nations to distract from their own problems. Jorge Ariasa was speaking outside the UN headquarters in New York.
Get ready to see how the United States, Colombia, and countries of the Lima cartel are going to use the topic of Venezuela here for everything. To hide the corruption scandals, the increase in narcotics production, their failures in the peace process, and their falling popularity at home. They'll use migration in Venezuela to try hide it all.
The president of the General Assembly of the United Nations is Maria Fernanda Espinosa. She is the fourth woman, but the first from Latin America and the Caribbean to preside over the assembly. She spoke exclusively to Telesur about the future challenges of the organization.
We all need to make an effort to bring the United Nations work closer to the people. That means answering people's problems in the best way possible. We need to build a more efficient organization which has better reactions and adapts to the times. I think it is important that all world leaders make it clear that the only way to solve global problems, such as climate change, disease and war, is through coordinated multilateral actions. To do that, a strong global leadership is needed.
Also happening at the UNGA, Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness will give the opening address at the CARICOM high-level breakfast event to launch Caribbean Moves, which is an initiative to raise awareness of non-communicable diseases and its effects on the region's people.
And to promote bold action to protect.
Other news now. On Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro addressed the nation. The president congratulated his ministers on the progress made last month as part of Venezuela's economic recovery program. He also praised both the security services and the Venezuelan public for their role in uncovering the plans behind last month's failed assassination attempt. 3 of the persons involved were arrested over the weekend. President Maduro condemned the persons behind his assassination attempt and confirmed that the perpetrators were associated with the country's far right.
Violent groups have been active since 2014. working on various coup attempts. We caught these terrorists red-handed under an investigation that started right after the assassination attempt against me. They have all confessed that they were working for members of the Venezuelan far right.
And in other news coming from Venezuela, according to the government, around 3,000 migrants have taken part in the Return to the Homeland plan. They've returned to Venezuela from Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, and other countries throughout the region. Migrants in Colombia shared with us the tough conditions they lived in.
Under the burning sun, or sometimes in cold weather, hundreds of Venezuelan migrants live on the streets in Colombia. Despite the announcement made by President Iván Duque to provide international help for the migrants, the aid has not arrived for many families.
We're surviving here, getting used to the weather. You see, it's normal now, but it's very cold. The other day it was hailing. The rain was very strong. I suggest Venezuelans not to come here.
Camps were built next to sewers, under bridges, without drinking water or any kind of medical care. They face threats of eviction as authorities blame them for invading public space.
They tell you, come, you can stay at my place, but then they tell you, no, you can't stay here any longer, you need to get a job. That's very difficult, so we start looking for petty jobs, like selling cigars, candy, or even we get to begging.
On the streets of Colombia, they easily become victims of drug trafficking and violence and prostitution.
In the city center, you can invariably see drugs and prostitution.
All the families who came here after they were promised jobs thought Colombia would at least guarantee their basic rights.
I was robbed because I had some money that I couldn't change because they didn't help me with that after finding out I'm Venezuelan. They asked for my passport that I didn't have. I got robbed and I lost all my money and plane tickets.
This hard reality here has made many Venezuelans return to their country after registering to the Return to the Homeland plan.
I'm glad to see what they're doing for us. I'm happy to go back. I'd rather stay there because you can find some job, but here my children sleep in the street.
I'm
very happy, especially because I haven't seen my family in a long time.
They leave behind discrimination, labor exploitation, and poor living conditions. These families go back to their home from Colombia to meet with their relatives and dear ones.
A number of workers' unions in Argentina have united to protest against President Mauricio Macri's austerity measures. Thousands were out in force on the streets of Buenos Aires on Monday. They strongly opposed the government's emergency $50 billion rescue package from the International Monetary Fund. The deal hasn't gone down well with those who hold the organization responsible for the financial collapse nearly 17 years ago. Protesters believe the new deal will hurt people.
For the comrades who have been left jobless, all the people who are going hungry because the town says enough, the people are tired of so much injustice.
Now we are submitted to the International Monetary Fund, and they are the ones who are managing the economy. I see very well that the people react, and it has to be the beginning of a plan of struggle. We have to mobilize every day until this government falls.
Argentina's largest labor union, the CGT, have warned that if labor strikes do not sway the government, it can expect growing protests. Now, a fresh strike has been announced, which will see all flights in, out, and within the country grounded.
A 36-hour strike has rallied people here in the historic Plaza de Mayo. Exceeding all expectations in size, a very big convoy from the Central Workers' Union are rejecting the economic politics that Mauricio Macri government is implementing, the IMF accord that is being signed in the United States, and in the defense of public education. Also, they are calling for a better health service and defending pensioners. All this is the opening of a 24-hour, even larger strike with the General Work Confederation that will see a halt to all public transport, including domestic and international flights. A truly overwhelming national shutdown against Mauricio Macri.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute.
world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. At least 5 people have died and 9 are missing in Mexico after a river and a dam overflowed due to heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall caused flash floods at the Paristico Dam and the Cutia River in western Mexico. Military troops are coordinating rescue and relief efforts, including cleaning up debris and mud from affected houses. The electoral campaign of Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad continues. Haddad toured the southwest of Brazil, visiting the former president, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, again on Monday. After campaign activities in northeastern Brazil, the PT candidate made a visit to the former president in Curitiba to reiterate his support and solidarity. After meeting with him, Haddad said that his main objective is to work for the restructuring of the democracy within the country. Haddad is expected to wrap up his day attending an event in defense of education, science, and technology. For more on the campaign, we go to our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Limas.
According to Evope, the conservative candidate is still in the first stage with 28% of the vote intention. For Fernando Haddad, he has gone up 3 percentage points, now with 22%. Next is the center-left candidate with 11%. The trend is for Haddad to continue to rise in the polls. In the coming days, there will be protests by feminist groups against the Bolsonaro for his sexist and fascist behaviors.
And still in Brazil, the far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro has reasserted his support for the death penalty. This was just after he told supporters that the recent attack on his life was to get him out of the presidential race. Bolsonaro was stabbed multiple times on the 6th of September during a campaign rally. He has told supporters that if elected, he will implement changes to the country's judicial system, including bringing back the death penalty. Bolsonaro wants to introduce tougher sentences and lower the age so that minors can be convicted as well. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced a plan to end the conflict between the state and the indigenous people of the Araucanía region. The plan includes investments worth $1.6 million in the region, but the Mapuche people are demanding political participation and compensation for the victims of state violence. They also consider the new plan an excuse for the militarization of their forests.
The fact of being indigenous people is something that fills us with pride. They enrich the culture and life of our country. For this reason, this constitutional reform seeks to protect the values and tradition of our people, also to recognize the contribution of our indigenous people made with the culture, language and customs. And it also obliged the state to preserve and promote that cultural diversity.
And members of the Mapuche community are expressing their concern about the multiple acts of police brutality and discrimination they are forced to endure.
I think that before proposing the peace accord here in the locality, Sebastián Piñera should start by apologizing to all the Mapuche children because of the discrimination and repression they have suffered at the hands of the state.
Political turmoil in Honduras continues to grow over the presidential elections. According to the opposition, President Juan Orlando Hernandez is trying his very best to remain in power, but his re-election is prohibited. So let's take a look in this report.
President Juan Orlando Hernandez was able to run for a second presidential term due to a reform of the criminal code that decriminalizes re-election, while the Constitution prohibits it.
The problem is that it has been done in an irregular way. At this time, there is no constitution of the Republic that is applied in the country. They are pure political agreements that participate in the regulation process of the re-election. In other words, it is legalizing the illegal. Therefore, it's not technically illegal to promote an action of this nature.
Although Hernandez had the permission of the Supreme Court of Justice to register in the 2017 elections, the regulation to apply for a second presidential term was suspended. So now the ruling party wants to implement the reform to the National Congress.
The regulation doesn't apply. The Congress doesn't regulate laws. These procedures are made by the executive only. What the Congress can do is regulate.
The opposition, led by Manuel Zelaya Rosales, thinks the way forward is through a referendum to call a National Constituent Assembly.
We have a failed state. There is no legal security. We have a Supreme Court of Justice that doesn't obey what people say. We still believe that a National Constituent Assembly is an alternative to heal this failed state.
While the ruling party presses for re-election, Hernandez insists that this will be his last term, even though he said the same thing during his first term.
It needs to be only one term, consecutive or alternating, but one term. The National Congress will have to decide.
The political system caused the crisis in the 2017 elections is still valid. A year has passed since the opposition demanded electoral reforms that haven't materialized. Without a real electoral reform that is legally binding, Hernandez would be free to run for a third presidential term.
The funeral for Botham Jean took place in his native St. Lucia on Monday. Jean's body was flown home over the weekend for the funeral. He was laid to rest at Chalk Cemetery. Botham was killed earlier this month in his Dallas home by a police officer. Calls for justice resonated throughout the funeral service.
The fact is that Botham lies here dead in this box. This is not fake news. There lies his body. The officer, the off-duty police officer, is alive and well. I will not plead any apology if my heart is in my face today. If St. Lucia's heart is in its face. St. Lucia is angry. People in the four corners of the earth are angry.
For those who choose to do evil, there is a day of reckoning. God will repay all the evil that is done to his children, because he said in his word, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." In the meantime, let us be good and patient. Let justice take its course, if there be any in this world. To those who continue to protest in his name for justice, we say thank you. But please, do it peacefully, for this is what Botham would want. Botham Shem Jean was not a silhouette. Botham Shem Jean, in his domain, posed no threat. In his apartment, they claim to have found some sort of cigarette. For those who have done and continue to perpetuate such evil, of this you will regret.
As the funeral was taking place in the minor basilica in Castries, the Dallas Police Department said it had fired Amber Geiger, the police officer who shot Botham Jean. In a statement, it said that Geiger was dismissed after an internal investigation found the officer engaged in adverse conduct when she was charged with manslaughter. The firing comes after widespread calls for action against Geiger, who had been on administrative leave since the shooting. And the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is standing firmly in solidarity with the family of Botham Jean. In a statement, OECS Chairman, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, calls upon the U.S. to ensure justice. Gonzalez also tells the United States that our small size ranking in global affairs should not lead to false assumptions about the strength of our resolve and determination in the fight for justice. On Monday, Trinidad and Tobago celebrated 42 years as a republic. As has become a new tradition, the country held its national awards ceremony. And this year, for the first time, the event was presided over by its first female president, Justice Paula Mae Weeks. 50 persons were honored in various categories, from culture, sport, religion, and national service. We take a short break now. World News is next.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Typhoon Trami is posing potential danger to Taiwan and Japan. The latest tropical cyclone in the West Pacific rapidly strengthened over the weekend, becoming a super typhoon Trami on Monday. It is currently equal to a Category 4 hurricane, and it continues to intensify. Trami could start producing winds equal to a Category 5 hurricane by Tuesday. A South Sudanese doctor running an overcrowded and underfunded hospital has won the UN Refugee Agency's Nobel Nansen Award. Now, the award is named after the Norwegian humanitarian who served as the first High Commissioner for the organization. Dr. Evan Atta Adha's clinic provides aid to over 100,000 refugees. He carries out surgeries in a dimly lit room using ketamine injections and spinal epidurals due to a lack of general anesthetic. The UNHCR chief said his profound humanity and selflessness have saved thousands of lives. This award goes to people who go out of their way to help refugees and forcibly displaced people. Sunday marked the beginning of the International Week of the Deaf. The National Federation for the Deaf has initiated awareness and training activities for its members in Senegal. The Federation will host an exhibition to highlight the know-how of its members, which is one of the themes of this year. Other issues around the political participation of deaf people in the electoral process were also discussed.
It's important for us. We are normal citizens. I want to see TV spots with an interpreter to explain exactly what we should do. If we are well informed, it will help us participate in the election.
The opposition against Supreme Court nominee in the United States is gathering momentum. Details on this and the other stories making headlines around the world.
Protests erupted on Monday against President Donald Trump's U.S. Supreme Court nomination, Brett Kavanaugh. Over 100 people were arrested in Washington, D.C. Demonstrators gathered outside the offices of senators who they believe can be persuaded to vote against Kavanaugh, including Susan Collins.
We are here to fight for all, and we believe that Senator Collins can be a hero. We believe she can do the right thing, and if she doesn't, we're going to replace her.
The bodies of a British man and his Thai wife have been found on their property in Thailand just days after they were reported missing. The police discovered their bodies buried near a small creek. The couple went missing last week. 2 men have been arrested. Police are searching for a third man who is the brother-in-law of the dead British man and is suspected of plotting their murder over a personal conflict. Iran has arrested 22 people in connection with the fatal attack on a military parade in the city of Ahvaz on the weekend. Dozens of people were killed, including soldiers. State TV showed those arrested blindfolded facing a wall. The United States has been accused of backing anti-government militia inside the country.
France's National Ethics Committee has said that medically assisted reproduction should be available to single women and same-sex couples. This will now lead to the possibility of a new law. The government plans to debate the bill before the end of this year. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you for watching.